understand how important it is for society, the University of Michigan, victims, and public to continue to hear about the events that took place, to adequately make change at institutions to prevent this from happening again. I'm Parker Stinar. I'm joined by my colleague, Michael Nimmo, and attorneys Jamie White and Steve Etsy. We represent nearly 200 victims of sexual abuse by Dr. Robert Anderson and the University of Michigan. We represent men, women, athletes, non-athletes, students, and members of the public that were sexually abused. And we represent Black men. University of Michigan has a student population of 2 to 5% Black individuals, yet nearly 50% of the victims of Dr. Anderson were Black men. Dr. Anderson preyed on Black men because he knew they were vulnerable. He knew that the university would not protect this group, regardless of how outrageous, dangerous, and perverse his conduct was. And he was right. Despite knowing about Dr. Anderson's sexual abuse, University of Michigan refused to protect this population of students. For more than 4 decades, University of Michigan protected Dr. Anderson and their reputation rather than their students from sexual abuse. University of Michigan prides themselves on being the leaders and the best. And this may be true athletically and academically, but it's far from true regarding protecting students, athletes, and the public from sexual abuse. The past and current administration has let down their students, alumni, and the public. They have allowed a culture that ignores sexual abuse and protects sexual predators. It is time that they are held accountable for this conduct. Our goal has been to uncover the truth, hold University of Michigan accountable, and demand our clients are fairly and justice is served with compensation for our clients. We seek fairness and we seek justice. And we're seeking changes in policies and procedures at the University of Michigan. However, as we all should know, the words fairness and justice vary from person to person, gender to gender, and race to race. We frequently hear stories of how unjust our criminal justice system is for Black individuals. That white criminals are sentenced differently than Black criminals, even if they commit the same crime. However, we rarely hear stories of how unjust our civil justice system is for Black individuals. Black plaintiffs in civil cases are treated differently than white plaintiffs. Juror biases consider race when determining credibility and honesty of a plaintiff. Juror biases consider race when determining the damages a plaintiff has sustained. Jurors award less money to Black plaintiffs than they do white plaintiffs, an unjust system. The same is true for mediation and settlements. Insurance companies consider race when determining plaintiff credibility, determining damages, and when determining settlement value. Historically, Black victims are compensated less than white victims, especially Black men. We refuse to allow the victims of Dr. Anderson to be discounted due to their color. No discounts allowed. We are experiencing a very significant time in history, a time where we will no longer tolerate injustices in America. We demand that our clients are treated fairly. We demand our clients receive justice. Every victim of sexual abuse experiences very significant traumas, physically, emotionally, and mentally. And there have been 2 similar institutional sexual abuse cases in the country. Jerry Sandusky in Penn State University and Larry Nassar in Michigan State University. Those victims were compensated based on their traumas and to punish both institutions for allowing the sexual abuse to take place. We demand that victims of Dr. Anderson and University of Michigan receive fair compensation based on their trauma rather than based on their color. Similar compensation like the victims at Penn State and Michigan State. The U of M Board of Regents are our jurors. These individuals will render a verdict and tell the world how much University of Michigan victims of sexual abuse and institutional failures are worth. Jordan Acker is a University of Michigan Board of Regent. Regent Jordan Acker is a partner at the law firm Goodman Acker. And in 2019, his law firm, Goodman Acker, filed a lawsuit on behalf of a Delta passenger who was sexually abused by a male passenger. The male passenger had exposed himself and touched the female passenger's leg, massaging it. And for the victim, Regent Acker's law firm filed a lawsuit for $10 million. $10 $10 million. I'm happy that Regent Acker and his firm are advocates for victims of sexual abuse and understand the damages that these victims suffer and the financial compensation these victims deserve. Our question for the University of Michigan Board of Regents is this: how much is a University of Michigan victim worth who Dr. Anderson attempted to masturbate? How much is a U of M victim worth who experienced genital touching and groping? How much is a U of M victim worth who is anally or vaginally penetrated? U of M Board of Regents, how much is a Michigan man worth? We demand that the University of Michigan finally stand for what it claims to be, the leaders and the best. Full and fair accountability and compensation. We demand no discounts. Jamie?
Thank you, Parker. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the most appalling sexual assault against a group of African Americans in the history of this country. There's an important conversation taking place in this country regarding racial inequalities that is long overdue. Despite the egregious mistakes that have occurred, these men, these Michigan men, have great affection for their university. While fair compensation is an important part of remedying the wrongs of the past, it is not the only action that my clients are requesting take place at the University of Michigan. The University of Michigan has an opportunity to learn from the past and to be a leader in this national movement. First-generation African-American college students come to this university without the same resources and guidance as many of their white counterparts. This makes them uniquely vulnerable to fall prey to not only the likes of Anderson, but also academic and social challenges, to name a few. The horrors of the women suffered at the hands of Larry Nassar are still hard for me to get my head wrapped around. I do not believe that any amount of compensation can make those wrongs right. And we are by no means suggesting those women do not receive everything they deserve. We are only requesting just and equal treatment under the eyes of the law. While litigation creates an adversarial tone is a general matter, these men love the University of Michigan. It is our goal and our hope that we can partner with the university to address the issues of the past and assist in developing a framework for going forward. With that said, I would like to introduce a client of mine, an extraordinary man, a Michigan man. He was captain of his Michigan team in the mid-70s. He went on to play for the San Francisco 49ers from 1979 to 1984. He's a four-time Pro Bowler and a two-time Super Bowl championship. He's an actor, film and theater, and a champion on and off the field. Ladies and gentlemen, Dwight Hicks.
Thank you all for being here. I wish it was a better occasion, but I brought with me a support system of my wife, Dana, teammates Raymond Johnson and Scott Corbin. And that means a lot. It means a lot to me, because when you have a support system, you feel that they're the foundation that help you along in your life. And I remember when I married Dana. Dana got sick shortly after. And she looked at me and she said, "Dwight, I know you didn't sign up for this. You could leave if you want to." And I was taken back by what she said. And I said, "Why would I leave you now when you need me the most?" I took a vow to love her, to care for her in sickness and in health, rich or poor, to death do us part. That meant something to me. I said, "No, honey, we're here together for the long run." And that's why she's here with me today. You see, When promises are made, promises should be kept, or things fall apart. It's as simple as that. You make a promise, you do everything you can, at least I feel that way, to keep that promise. Now, we'll fall short sometimes, but we do everything we can to keep that promise kept. Black lives do matter. It's as simple as that. We all saw, the world saw, George Floyd's life snuffed out. And it's interesting that the world grieved. The world, it wasn't just a movement in the United States, it was a world movement because it touched everybody who saw it, and they played it over and over again. And if it didn't do anything to you, if it didn't touch your heartstrings, then something's seriously wrong with you. And since the inception of this republic, there was a promise made. We, the people, but blacks weren't considered people back then. And then there was a time where slavery was abolished. And there was a promise made to black folks and reparations that were supposed to be given. They were promised, but they were never kept. As I said, when promises aren't kept, things fall apart. Kimberly Lattice Jones, who's an activist, she described the inequities of economics as playing a Monopoly game. And white folks had the dice for over 400 years. They get to roll 400 times before a black person could even hold the dice. And that's all I'll say about that. You look her up and see what she has to say. It's pretty interesting. She's very passionate, so she gets a little heated. But if you just listen to the words and what she's saying, they ring very true. Now, I went to the University of Michigan. I was the first one in my high school, in my family, to go to college. I didn't know what to expect. I asked my mother, Mom, what college should I go to? I had a very loving, nurturing, and a mother with a lot of wisdom. And she said, Dwight, this isn't my choice. This is your choice. You choose where you go. And later in life, I asked her, I said, Mom, why did you say that to me? And she said, because if you have gone to a college that I wanted you to go to, you could have simply said, if you had a bad time, a bad experience, that, Mom, I went to the university here or there because that's where you told me to go. And she said, I didn't want you to be able to blame it on me. This is your life. This is your decision. And so I chose the University of Michigan. Now, I can remember when I was in high school, our high school coach used to play this album of fight songs over and over again from the first player that walked into the locker room. And he would play it until he got ready to get up and speak. And so I would hum along to these songs, as I prepared to play that Saturday morning or any Saturday morning. And I really didn't think much of these fight songs until my senior year, when I started getting recruited. And then all of a sudden, I heard, because it was the last fight song of the album, and after all the other fight songs were sung, played, there was a crescendo. And after that crescendo, hail to the victors. I had heard that song over and over and over again. but I never had really, I had listened to that song, but I'd never heard it. This particular Saturday morning, I heard that song. The words are very, very important to that university. The words touched me in a way that I said, yeah, I want to be a part of that. I started watching Michigan games on TV. I really started to pay attention to them. And the emblems, identifiable throughout the world, those winged helmets, that Block M. It's like, wow, what a tradition. And I would get a chance to maybe even get to play in the granddaddy of them all, as Keith Jackson would say, the Rose Bowl. Like, yeah. Then I researched the history of the academic excellence. Yeah, that's what I want. I'm going to be a Michigan man. I want to be a Wolverine. So I sought out and traveled to Ann Arbor, Michigan, with all the hopes and dreams of an 18-year-old just starting out life, with the backing of my family. My mother, my dad died when I was 11. He never got to see me play. But I was determined to be the best that I could be, to represent my family, my community, and myself. Well, I had had physicals before when I got to the University of Michigan in high school. But what happened to me in that room with Dr. Anderson, I have no words for. I know something was happening that was kind of strange, and I even questioned him, and he said it's part of the process. So I felt that I had to suck it up. I'm going to be a Michigan man. Maybe this is part of it. I don't know. I didn't have the words for it as an 18-year-old, because I've just felt that, hey, this is what you have to do, and I did it. And along the way of playing football, the toughness that Bo Schembechler instilled in us, and how we played on the football field, that was all part of it. You look back at some of those films and you watch Michigan play. We're a force to be reckoned with. And it was because I did it because of that song, Hail to the Victors. I wanted to be a part of that. I was a part of that. Michigan wasn't the big house back then. It was just Michigan Stadium. But the players that played in that stadium, we would say it's our house. And we defended our house. We represented the University of Michigan wherever we went with the utmost respect. But what did the University of Michigan give us in return? A chance to get an education. It's nice. That's what I wanted. A chance to play the most incredible football in the highest form. Michigan was a powerhouse then. Now it seems not so much. But still, I love the university. I love what it stands for. And I just want, and I'm speaking for the Raymond Johnsons, the Scott Corbins, and all the teammates that wore the maize and blue. I'm still proud of that university. My daughter graduated from the University of Michigan. My brother graduated from the University of Michigan. It means a lot to our family because I thought we were family. But family sometimes disappoints you and you move on with life. Well, I moved on. I forgot, or I shouldn't say I forgot, I suppressed some of the things that happened to me because I just thought it was part of the process. But as I got older and all these stories and start coming out, people start coming out about what had happened to them. And I thought, wow, is that what happened to me? And I questioned it, but more and more stories came out. That's why I'm here today. I still love the University of Michigan, and I hope the University of Michigan understands and acknowledges what happened to so many of us. And I would hope that they would recognize the trauma that it bestowed on us. But there's always can be a reconciliation. And I hope the University of Michigan will truly mean and stand for hail to the victors, the leaders and best. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwight. Next, I would like to introduce Grace French. Grace, I've known for several years. She was a victim of Dr. Larry Nassar. She suffered horrifically. We're not going to go into those details today, but I think it's important for you folks to know that Grace has continued her efforts as a victim advocate over the last several years. She founded an organization called the Army of Survivors, which has several people involved with it, but more importantly, she's putting her time into assisting people like herself that have been victims of sexual abuse. And finally, Grace is a graduate of the University of Michigan. She reached out to me in March with an email and just said, anything I can do to help these men, I'm on board. And that's been her continuing monologue. So without any further ado, Grace French.
Hello, everybody. My name is Grace French, and like Jamie mentioned, I'm the founder and president of the Army of Survivors. I'm here today to show the world that being a survivor of sexual abuse and institutional betrayal is a shared experience that creates bonds that cross all boundaries, boundaries of where and when and by whom that violence was committed, boundaries of race, age, or cultural background. Our shared bond is formed because perpetrators who manipulated, maneuvered, and even gaslit their victims to physically abuse them have created an army of survivors now willing to publicly call out their abusers and those enablers. 2 years ago, my sister survivors and I stood up and told our stories about Larry Nassar at Michigan State University. The case today at my alma mater is a repeat of our tragedy, and it breaks my heart. Robert Anderson took advantage of his power over these athletes as a team doctor for the University of Michigan. Power he was given because athletes were required to see him and because no one addressed the accusations against him. He used that power to molest and abuse young men over decades. These athletes gave their all on the field for the University of Michigan and were sent to someone who took an oath to heal, only to find a man who would haunt their nightmares for years to come. We should examine why these athletes weren't helped and why no one stood up for them over a white doctor. I know that my sister survivors and I feel that our voices were heard partly because of our privilege, because we are largely a group of white, middle and upper class, young females, and our faces can draw sympathy. We had global media attention, not because our voices deserved more weight, but I believe because of those identities. Even so, years later, we are still fighting for justice and reform from USA Gymnastics and the US Olympic Committee. And Michigan State University's responses heaped trauma on a group of traumatized individuals. These survivors from U of M deserve equal justice, opportunities to heal, a truly independent outside investigation, and recognition of the years of trauma they have endured. These men deserve a chance at healing and at justice we sister survivors have fought so hard for. All of us need to examine how we treat those who come forward and the systems of privilege and power that institutions have over athletes that lead to that abuse. Make no mistake, while Michigan is now facing its reckoning in these two cases, our state is not singular. There are abusers who have yet to be reported in many other states, more victims waiting to come forward, and more institutions that need that same light of day shown on abuse, past and present, and in their own systems. These athletes here today gave their hearts and health to represent the University of Michigan. But what will the University of Michigan do for them? We asked the university the same questions we asked of Michigan State University. How much is a young person worth? Why didn't you stop him? And what will you do for a just outcome? To my brother survivors, I stand with you. We all stand with you. And we will be beside you in this fight for justice. To the University of Michigan, my alma mater, I beg you to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace French. And then my colleague Steve Esty has brief comments.
I want to first say thank you, Mr. Hicks, for telling your story. It takes a lot of courage. I truly appreciate that. And what I want the university to know is that I want them to treat their athletes in this legal arena the same way they do in the athletic arena. What I mean by that is Michigan athletes are revered. They represent the university. And I want the university to hold them in the same regard in this arena as they do on the athletic field. And they can do that by recognizing the harm that's been done to these individuals. Sexual trauma is sexual trauma. It doesn't matter if you're male or female. The trauma is the same. And that's what I want and what we want the university to recognize. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. At this point in time, Parker Stinar would like to introduce another extraordinary individual.
I want to introduce Dr. Airron Richardson. Airron was a student at University of Michigan from 1994 to 1998, where he was co-captain of the wrestling team, 1998 Big Ten champion, two-time All-American, and first-team academic All-American. He was also president of the German Club and voted a top 10 campus leader by U of M student publications. Prior to attending graduate school, he was a member of the U.S. national freestyle wrestling team and alternate on the 2000 Olympic Games. He received his MD and MBA from Vanderbilt University. In 2008, he completed his emergency medicine residency at the University of Chicago Medical Center, and he completed a sports medicine fellowship at Duke University in 2009. He has worked in Northwest Indiana for the last 11 years. He is a volunteer clinical associate professor at the Indiana University School of Medicine, an adjunct faculty member at Feinberg School of Medicine at Northwestern University, and a clinical assistant professor at the Medical College of Wisconsin. Over the years, he has mentored over a dozen high school and college students who have been interested in pursuing careers in medicine. Thank you for being here, Airron.
Thank you, everyone. I do have some remarks. I'm here as a former student athlete, physician, and father. I share an unfortunate bond with scores of people who have stepped out from the shadows to share how they were abused and manipulated by Dr. Anderson. For many, there is shame, embarrassment, and anger. Initially, I was not eager to participate in a press conference to acknowledge that I endured inappropriate sexual behavior at Schembechler Hall as a former student athlete. There's an emotional toll that confronting the topic takes. I was only able to reach this point with the help of my mother and several close friends. And now I hope to be a voice for the untold numbers of former athletes, some of whom I suspect are now coaches and administrators who experience similar abuse, but are not ready, able, or comfortable coming forward. As a physician, I'm acutely aware of how Dr. Anderson violated the trust of his patients and used medicine as his shield. It is absolutely infuriating to me that his behavior was allowed to persist for so long. He used the inherent trust people have for doctors and the university setting and twisted it in such a sinister way. He veered far outside what was medically appropriate or necessary with his examinations. It is unconscionable for fellow physicians to ever ignore egregious behavior by their peers. I am the father of a young son, and thinking about him and his safety, if I were to entrust his care to coaches and administrators, was an additional catalyst for me. Should he follow in my footsteps, I want mechanisms and policies in place to protect him and other young people from abusers like Dr. Nassar and Dr. Anderson, who prey on the innocence of young people. The tension in our country the past several months has been palpable. Societal inequities, the pandemic, unemployment, etc. There seems to be a perfect storm for people who want to learn, to recognize what I and people who look like me have always known. Not all of our citizens are treated equally under the law. In college, I was a 6'4", 250-pound Black man, and outwardly, no one would suspect I was a victim. While the data reflecting how Black men are discounted by our justice system is extremely disappointing, they are not at all surprising. The good news is this does not have to continue to be that way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this point in time, we would entertain questions if there are any.
I never came forward. As Dr. Airron said, that you don't feel comfortable. It's personal. And a lot of people probably were abused that will never come up. But I felt it was very important. It was paramount for me to be here today, to be that voice for the people that cannot stand up for themselves.
I feel exactly the same way. Even when one of my teammates, Andy Rovat, came forward, I was very hesitant to come forward because I have a lot going on. I mean, I have my career, my family to think about. How will I be perceived. And I had to work through that emotionally, to be quite honest, before I felt comfortable enough to be able to speak in front of a room like this. So I think the shame is real. And even as a medical professional, and I could recognize that nothing that happened was my fault, but still it's not something you want to be the first person to speak about or to bring that conversation about. And I was worried about people, I guess I was worried about being the face of a survivor. And that could stem from how masculinity is perceived in this country, and we're all aware of that, but that is a very real deterrent from people coming forward. And I know many more people who just still did not want to speak about this, and so that's why I'm also here.
Thank you, Aaron. Are there any other questions? Mr. Murphy?
Oh, for me, no. No one, I've gotten letters saying that there's an investigation, and if you wanted to speak about the experience, whatever happened to you, that they would like to hear it. There's a attorney group for the University of Michigan. However, at that point, I had already had counsel, and I'm not one that's very adept at legalese. So I let our counsel respond.
Do you want to respond to that, Aaron?
I would echo that as well. I received letters, but that was about it.
Kim?
How we feel about it? I'm not investigating them. There are other parties, and as I said, our counsel, probably talking to them more. And I would just refer to our counsel.
What I would say, Kim, is that, clearly there have been concerns about the WilmerHale investigation. I'm presuming that's what you're referring to. Those concerns have been brought to the court's attention, and there's an attempt to remedy those concerns. And we, when I say we, myself and my clients, we're going to do everything we can to provide a truly independent investigative report at the conclusion of this matter. Parker?
And I would just comment that our wish is that the WilmerHale report shows the depth of institutional failures and cover-up by the University of Michigan.
Please.
Certainly not asking for details, but can you share kind of a timeline of looking back now when Dr. Anderson abused you, and just kind of with the freshman year and each year?
It started our freshman year, so I don't mean to interrupt you, but it started freshman year, and each year you get an exam. And every year, that was part of the exam. I don't need to go into any details. I think the details and the reputation of Dr. Anderson speaks for themselves. So I don't think, elaborating on what happened to me, it doesn't do any justice. We all know, and the university knows. Yes.
And my follow-up is, do you know of anyone who told Coach Shumba what was happening?
I was on a Zoom call with some of the guys, and some of the guys did not want to say themselves personally what had happened to them. They didn't want to, as you say, face the music, because it is personal, and some people can stand up and speak, and some people cannot. But I think we are our brother's keeper, and that's why I'm here today, to speak up, to give a voice, because something needs to be done desperately, because it's in all our institutions, from the highest form of government, corporations, it's everywhere. And if we don't fix it now, as I said, promises are made, and promises need to be kept, or things fall apart. And you see that right now in society everywhere, all around the world. Do I think Bo knew? I have no idea.
You know what? So we went on the record last week with EB 17 and a complaint that was filed in the Eastern District Federal Court of Michigan, and unambiguously indicated that Bo Schembechler was told and reported that behavior to Canham. So anything above and beyond that, I don't know how necessary that is, but we clearly are on the record that Bo Schembechler was told of this abuse.
I have a question for Greg. Greg, Wilmer Hale is a law firm that is doing the investigation on Dr. Anderson and what happened. They recently released a report about Provost Martin Silver. And it was a different report that was released by the Attorney General when they investigated Michigan State University and what happened with Larry Nassar. I wondered what your thoughts were on how the reports were different and what your hope is around not only transparency but accountability when they release the Anderson report.
Totally. I think with independent reports, it's really important that the report be released to the public before it goes to any board members first. I've experienced board members wanting to see reports first and then release parts of it to the public, which I don't think is really a truly independent or outside investigation. Accountability comes from that report, and in some cases those reports have names in them, they have ways to move forward, and they have steps that the justice system could take in order to make sure that those people are held accountable. I think what's really important with those investigations is that the university does not have a hand in them at all. I think it's really iffy when the university is even at the table for any of those interviews or any of the investigation of the report. I don't know if that answered your question. Okay.
Sounds very familiar.
Dan? Do you mind if I respond?
No, absolutely.
So not yet, Dan, and that is the concern of attorneys and victims in this matter. Again, we're hoping that Michigan will be a partner and a leader in this conversation, but what we know historically is that African Americans are treated differently in the criminal justice system and the civil justice system. We've seen this in these sorts of cases, and we've seen this in the system overall. So this is a shot across the bow, so to speak. Michigan, if they truly are going to be accountable, should not consider discounting these men, these African-American men in particular, as less worthy or less deserving or less damaged as a result of Dr. Anderson's behavior. And Parker touched on this earlier, but I think it's important to look at the statistics of what happened here. We have a university that, as we sit here today, is about 4.5% African American. I could tell you in the 1970s, it was significantly less. But we have a victim group that makes up the majority of the class. And what I would suggest to our community is that was not an accident. Dr. Anderson, like all predators, finds his way into vulnerable communities. And what I've suggested to you folks is that young African-American men in the 1970s and today, but in particular in the 1970s, were particularly vulnerable. Anderson found that vulnerability. He exposed that vulnerability. It was exposed to the University of Michigan, and they buried it. They buried it at the expense of these men and to bolster their bottom line and their brand. And for that, they need to be held accountable. So are they going to be a partner in that accountability, or are they going to be an adversary? And that is what we have yet to figure out, Dan.
Kim?
I have a follow-up to that question. At the beginning, Parker, you had mentioned that you lawyers at the group represent 200 victims, and half of them are African American. I wondered if you consulted with some of the other lawyers that are representing victims. There's quite a number of them out there. Have you talked with them about what their clients, what the population and demographics of their groups they're representing, if they have a similar makeup in their groups they're representing?
So what we know is there is a large percentage of the victims that are African-American men, similar to what Jamie stated earlier as far as the percentages of African-American students on campus and Dr. Anderson's approach to those individuals, knowing that they were vulnerable in the late 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. The majority of individuals in the athletic department, whether it was trainers or coaches, as well as at the campus with administrators and presidents, were white individuals. And we believe that Anderson preyed on that population, the African-American men, knowing that they were in an environment where they would be less believed and any complaints wouldn't be taken seriously, especially against a white physician who is so highly regarded and so close to others within the athletic department.
Any other questions? So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here today. We are going to make ourselves and our clients available for interviews. If anybody is interested, I maybe coordinate that through Blake, or just reach out and tap us on the shoulders. We'll be here for another 30 minutes or so. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.